because our casualties would exceed 100 million people, far exceed 100 million people. No people in the history of the world ever sustained such a loss and stayed alive.
On that note, we'll break and continue with a collective examination and continuance of our history after this. We'll go over some of the areas that undoubtedly we weren't able to cover in the individual interviews. Let's start with you, Professor Van Sertima.
Yes, there are one or two things that I want to raise. First of all, there's a different kind of Holocaust which is even more terrifying than the destruction of people. Often death can be merciful. There's a nuclear bombing of the African brain. That kind of Holocaust, the mental Holocaust that occurred, whereby many Africans who were colonized were actually had their African character almost zapped away from them, and something else planted upon their brains, which is a kind of duplication of the European. They were turned into European duplicates. I could say that at the time I was 24, with the exception of an interval during our upheaval and the death of my father, I was a European duplicate. I was a British duplicate. Everything that the British wanted me to think, I could enter their brain. Every reflex, every attitude, every prejudice that was native to the British Empire was in my brain. And it occupied at least 95% of my brain. It is only in later years, as one became aware of African civilizations and American civilizations, that this began to fall away.
Did you love England at that time?
Tremendously. I would celebrate. I mean, like now, for example, suppose I was still in the British Empire, which no longer exists except in the mind of the British, and the Falkland Islands thing was going on. I would be waiting patiently every moment to see an Argentine ship go down. This is the kind of loyalty, allegiance to the enslaver that became part of our inheritance.
You sang God Save the Queen.
Not only sang God Save the Queen, I felt proud that I was in an empire which was able to put everybody in their right place, including the Americans. I was very upset when I read that Americans had broken away from British rule. This is the kind of training we were given. Not a single book on Africa did I see before I was 20, not a single book.
So we're talking about the evils of the colonization of the mind as well as of land and body.
We're talking about the rise of the evil genius of Europe and Western racism. There wasn't enough soldiers in all Europe to hold down that vast world. They had to conquer something else other than just the physical body. They had to conquer the mind. And maybe the most tragic and dubious achievement was the convincing of so many people that they were supposed to be ruled over by these Europeans. It was one of the great propaganda miracles.
What was the most effective vehicle for that propaganda?
The Bible. And the assumption that the European was a Christian. He never was a Christian. He never will be a Christian. And there are two things the European dares not live by. If he tried to live by them 24 hours, he is finished. And that is Christianity and democracy. Because his civilization, his way of life, his power is based on things diametrically opposed to those two things.
How does the Bible help enslave the mind? I'm asking.
By saying that this is the will of God. There's an excellent book, good God, I haven't seen it in years though, except as I was copying my library, called The Role of the Missionary in Conquest. A lot of the land was taken from the Africans, with the missionary going ahead of the colonizer and telling them it is the will of God that we control this land. A lot of the land, the Kenyan highlands, a lot of land in Uganda was taken over by the church. In fact, the Catholic Church had title over most of the land surface of Uganda and had to relinquish it completely to this very day. Christianity was an instrument of colonialism, the handmaiden of colonialism. And I can remember as a little boy wanting to teach the junior class in Sunday school. And I began to look into the great book, trying to find my own people, and I didn't see that image nowhere. I tried to find the word Negro, and it wasn't in the Bible. I didn't know there was no such thing as a Negro, you know. And I looked into Sunday school lesson, look at all these images, and all these images told me that I was nothing. I was outside of everything in the world, and that all the achievement in the world was done by white people. I go to the basic history books, and I see nothing but white images. I see nothing that endears me to myself, or to my own people.
Professor Ben, what do you have to say about the missionary position? I should say the practice of missionaries.
Well, I don't have anything good to say, so I could make it by that one statement. And I don't think anyone who knows the African history could compliment the missionaries. First thing is that the assumption is made by Europeans, Billy Graham and others, and I noticed that he's getting his lumps now, for having the courage to say that somebody has practiced Christianity, but I don't know what he meant by that either. But number one, Christianity started in Africa at a place called Alexandria with two people, Pantheus and Boetius. It spread across the North African continent. There were 7 patriarchs, equivalent to the word pope, 27 bishops before it arrived in Europe. An African by the name of Augustine, who made modern Christianity the basis for his writing, Europeans copied. Augustine's books are called, some of them, of the 48 books, the Confession that tells you who he was. On Christian doctrines, they laid down the fundamentals of modern Christianity, and the other one called the Holy City of God. It is not only the Bible, the Christian Bible, however. The Old Testament, or the Torah, as it is called, speaks of chosen people. God made a world full of people and select a handful to be the special ones. The Quran and Islam equally. The jihads were brought. Although Ben Habib and Hassan Kubadi Ben Rabad taught Muhammad ibn Abdullah, who was illiterate in his own language, the fundamentals of the religions that the fundamentals upon which all three got their beginning, we were told, and still being told, that there is a holy land for us in Palestine or Jerusalem. There's a holy land for us in Bethlehem. There's a holy land for us in Mecca. But not a single piece of holy land in the 13.8 million square miles of African territory. Yet, all three of those religions that I've spoken about got their fundamental principles. The concept of Mary, Jesus, and Joseph, this whole concept came from the Book of the Dead, with Horus and so forth. The concept of a one true God before all other gods was taught by the Africans of the Nile, Akhenaten, specifically the god Aten, long before the birth of Moses.
Let me ask you this, Professor Ben. Were you, like Professor Van Sertima, raised with another awareness and another religious loyalty and national loyalty?
Yes.
Where were you raised?
I was raised in the Hebrew religion.
What nation?
I grew up in Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands. And I was raised, therefore, in American territory. But the same colonialism. I remember myself as a youngster on the 4th of July, walking with a red, white, a little flag with the, what it was then, 40-something stars, and running down there when Eleanor Roosevelt came and all these different things. And, I volunteered in World War II, Nobody called me. I volunteered. I was so stupid. I went to Panama to a segregated army where I couldn't go on the bus with the American people. And in Panama, I went to Panamanians. I could go around. I came to Newport News, Virginia, in the service. And I couldn't go on the ferry. They had a line called nigger officers and the white officers. That happened to me. And do you know that a German soldier that I was guarding, officer, that asked me, nigger, he said, exact word he said to me, nigger officer, do you know that when this is over, I'm coming to America and be your boss? And then I started for the first time to get some sense. Although I had been segregated